Powerful, mysterious, charismatic, everyone knows the name, but what is his story? Today we are diving into the lore of the Shadowed One. The Shadowed One is the leader and co-founder of the Dark Hunter organization along with his accomplice, Ancient. It is these two beings who are actually of the same species and share the same unknown homeland and by extension fellow Dark Hunter Tyrant. What I like about this is the resemblance can actually be seen, with the skull and tail being among their shared physical attributes. I don't know if this was intentional at the time these mocks were designed, but it's cool nonetheless. It is also Ancient who, due to their long-standing trust and partnership, is the only one to know the Shadowed One's true name. Much of the Shadowed One's early life and activities on his homeland before establishing the Dark Hunters were unknown to the Makuta and the Matoran, and are unrecorded. After his homeland suffered a civil war, which he and Ancient may or may not have had something to do with, the Shadowed One approached Ancient with his idea of starting an organisation of assassins and thieves everyone in the Matoran universe would come to know and fear, the Dark Hunters. The Shadowed One and Ancient left their bleak war-torn land behind and journeyed across the remote islands of the southern Matoran universe, where they discovered Udina, and where they chose to base their new organisation. It is there where the Shadowed One began to lay the groundwork for the Dark Hunters and keeping profiles of all his employees. The Shadowed One often experimented on subjects, and it was during one of these endeavours to create a more powerful Dark Hunter he created the monstrous Sentrak. This being, kept in a state of being neither alive nor dead through his master's experiments, has served as the Shadowed One's bodyguard ever since. The Shadowed One also liked to collect and keep trophies, one being the staff of Artaka, which he ordered be stolen from Metra Nui. He also ordered 3 of his servants, Lurker, Gatherer and Triglax, to acquire for him a tower of psionics and bring them back to Udina as a prize. This they did, and brought the Toa Variant from Toa Norik's team back to the Dark Hunter base, where she was placed in a stasis tube, and there she remained until the Matoran universe was destroyed. The Shadowed One was present at the induction of 6 beings into his organisation, Skakdi, who would later break away to form the Paraka. As can be read about in BIONICLE Legacy of Evil, the Shadowed One manipulated and altered the layout of his fortress to lead the Paraka into a hopeless maze until he dropped them before him in his chamber, where he attempted to disintegrate Zaktan with his eye-beams for the group's treachery. In a turn of events even the Shadowed One wasn't expecting, Zaktan remained alive but as a constantly shifting mass of protodites, which perhaps sent a more potent symbol to the renegade Dark Hunters than what simply killing Zaktan would have done. With a warning message to the scheming Skak descent, the Shadowed One sent Avak, Vezok and Radak on an assignment to Metra Nui, with orders to release the Kanohi dragon upon the city in an effort to force the governing Turaga, Duma, to surrender to the Dark Hunters. Duma refused the Shadowed One's ultimatum and called upon a team of Toa, one of whom was Lhikan, to defeat the escaped Rahi. The Shadowed One had lost his chance and his patience, and after a failed attempt at kidnapping Turaga Duma, he launched a full-scale invasion of Metra Nui. This marked the beginning of the Toa-Dark Hunter War. The war raged on, and the Shadowed One found he had committed most of his operatives and resources on the war, and he needed a turning point in which to end the engagement in his favour. His chance came when an embittered and disillusioned Toa of Air by the name of Nadiki approached the Shadowed One with an offer: betray his fellow Toa in exchange for control of the city of Metra Nui when the Dark Hunters had won. The Shadowed One agreed, only planning to use Nadiki to help him win the city and then betray him himself, but neither of them got their chance, as Nadiki was found out by his former friend and leader Toa, Lhikan. With Nadiki's betrayal discovered before he could carry out his plan against the Toa, Lhikan accepted a deal to let the Dark Hunters leave the city peacefully if they gave up the precious Makoki stone, which Hakan had stolen years prior and Lhikan had lost friends and nearly his own life trying to gain. With the war over, Nadiki confronted the Shadowed One, and the Dark Hunter leader paired him with Kreka, whose dependability, albeit stupidity, would keep Nadiki in check, whose traitorous past the Shadowed One was wary of. It was around this time that a vortex of the island of Zia called Rudaka approached the Shadowed One requesting to train with the Dark Hunters but not to join. The Shadowed One flatly refused at first, until Rudaka told him that Nadiki was trying to leave the Dark Hunters, something one wasn't even to try to attempt, lest they suffer the Shadowed One's eye beams. After some consideration, the Shadowed One decided to accept Rudaka's offer as long as she used her Rutuka to mutate Nadiki into a hideous spider form, so no Toa could ever accept him, thus keeping him in servitude to the Shadowed One perpetually. Some thousands of years later, and still unbeknownst to many in the Matoran universe, the first pieces of Makuta Teridax's plan were moving. He hired out the two Dark Hunters, Krekker and Nadiki, as well as Eliminator, professional loose end tire of the Dark Hunters, to aid him in his conquest of Metra Nui from within, a plan which at first involved kidnapping and then posing as Turaga Duma. Concurrent to the events we see in the film BIONICLE 2, Legends of Metra Nui, the Shadowed One began to grow suspicious as to why Krekker and Nadiki had not returned from Metra Nui. He put Lariska in charge of Adina and set out for Metra Nui himself, along with his bodyguard Sentrak, as well as his huge and powerful servant Voparak. With abilities that allowed him to sense fluctuations in time, Voparak soon detected the presence of the Kanohi Vahi on Metra Nui and knew the Shadowed One would be interested in acquiring an object of such power, and so set off to return it to his master. With the Mask of Time in their possession, the three most powerful Dark Hunters continued their search of Metra Nui. It was here that Sentrak and the Shadowed One stumbled upon Toa-Dark conversing with a Vizorak. Confused as to the improbability of such a scenario, the Shadowed One realised it was an illusion with Vakama trapped within, and Makuta Teridax revealed himself, the illusion dissipating, and his huge menacing form squaring up to the leader of the Dark Hunters. The Makuta bargained with the Shadowed One for possession of the Mask of Time, until Vakama informed the Shadowed One how Teridax was responsible for the deaths of his two operatives, Krekker and Nadiki. The Shadowed One attacked, piercing the Makuta's armour with his eye-beams, and disintegrating the wings he had formed from absorbing Nevork. As the pair clashed, Vakama launched forward on his jetpack and grasped the Mask of Time. The Shadowed One saw it and turned his eye-beams on Vakama's jetpack and destroyed it. Enter Voparak. The giant attacked Makuta, only to hit back with his power of vacuum and knock the Dark Hunter unconscious. Teridax then launched the Shadowed One onto his knocked-out servant and aged him 3,000 years in mere seconds. Teridax continued to pursue Vakama with the Mask of Time, but with two of his operatives down and his plans foiled, the Shadowed One swore revenge, and on that day, the Dark Hunter-Brotherhood War began, a war which continued to rage until the Matoran universe's great enemy was eventually destroyed thousands of years later. Soon after the outbreak of the Dark Hunter-Brotherhood War, the Shadowed One dispatched operatives to retrieve the Staff of Artaka, which he used as down payment for Vortex-made weapons. When the Toa-Nuva came to Odina seeking the staff, Pohata used his powers over stone to cause the fortress to crumble around them and make their escape. The Dark Hunters at this point had entered an uneasy arrangement with the Order of Matanui, which the Shadowed One had loaned his operative Lariska for a mission against the Brotherhood of Makuta. During the events of Destiny War, the Shadowed One had ordered a blockade of Zia in order to prevent the Vortex from sending weapons to the Brotherhood of Makuta. The Vortex had been playing both sides of the conflict, and after failing to convince the Toa to kill Rudaka in exchange for the Staff of Artaka, the Shadowed One saw to dealing with Zia himself. Ancient had also been in contact with the Order of Matanui through Toa Helrix. He had received a coded message from the Order, and it was clear that there was no future for him, nor the Dark Hunters, if they did not help against Makuta. He joined the Shadowed One on Zia, which, although the Shadowed One had been convinced by Helrix not to destroy the island, had already been heavily damaged in the battle between the Toa-Dark and the Kanohi Dragon. On Zia, the Shadowed One found the Makuta viruses left by Makuta Kojal, who had planned to add them to the weapons supplied by the Vortex before he was killed. The Shadowed One intended to use the viruses to his own advantage against the Order and the Makuta, while Ancient, feeling the Dark Hunter shouldn't be entrusted with that kind of power, suggested ransoming them, to which the Shadowed One only said,
"Apologies, old friend, but you know the old saying, a secret shared is no longer a secret."
Ancient, the Shadowed One's oldest and most trusted ally, was disintegrated by his master's eye beams, never to walk the earth again. While on Zia, the Shadowed One was approached by the Baraki to offer an alliance. They had information about the virus he had found and how the Makuta had used it to strike down the Great Spirit, and once the Order and the Makuta were out of the way, rule the universe together. The Shadowed One agreed to meet the Baraki's leader Prydak on neutral ground, the island of Kazani, where the pair struck their deal to remove Teridax and near the Makuta from power. The Baraki's army was ready to march on Metra Nui, but by which point it was too late. Earthquakes rocked the Matoran universe, and the Shadowed One had already abandoned Zia after a loose virus had struck the island and had fled to Spherus Magna. Before Prydak even had time to get angry at the Shadowed One for reneging on his deal, Teridax had been destroyed by the falling Bota Magna, and the mass exodus from the Matoran universe onto the newly formed Spherus Magna had begun. After the fall of Teridax, the Shadowed One began the Dark Hunters anew on Spherus Magna from the remnants of its previous members, any that survived the cataclysmic battle between Makuta and Matanui, and any Skrull or Bone Hunters who naturally found a home under the Shadowed One's leadership, and still kept secret in his possession were the Makuta viruses he had found on Zia. And that is where the story of the Shadowed One ends, as did the story of Legacy Bionicle. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Shadowed One's story. He was an extremely integral character to the storyline of Bionicle's original run, so there's an awful lot to cover. If you have any interesting facts or trivia about the Shadowed One, or indeed anything I forgot to add, please leave a comment down below and discuss this interesting and badass character. Goodbye for now.